This is actually the morning after I attempted to film this video for the first time, and I got about 75% of the way through before I realized that my mic wasn't recording, which for an episode on audio is some sort of beautiful, horrible irony. That just means I had a practice run, so hopefully this one will be better. As more and more churches are looking for ways to improve their church's live stream on a weekly basis, I see a lot of attention and questions directed towards the visual side of live streaming. What camera should I buy? What kind of graphics should I put up? What about the lighting? All that kind of thing. But the audio half of video is so incredibly important. I would argue even possibly more important than the visual aspect of the video that you're watching. For example, would you rather watch a video that looks like this but sounds like this, or a video that looks like this but sounds like this? Audio plays a massive role in the quality of your production value in general, but also does a lot to transport the listener into the atmosphere of the room that they're actually seeing. Today, we're going to go over the absolute basics of audio for church live streams. Now, to all of my fellow audio snobs, I mean pros out there, instead of listing in the comments all the things that I forgot or that I should have mentioned, why don't you jump on over to our Discord? There's hundreds of people on there asking questions every day on how to get their audio set up, and you can help be part of the solution instead of complaining to me why I didn't fix the problem. Are we good? Good, let's get started. In an effort to not make this video 3 hours long, we're going to focus primarily on vocal microphones today. We'll leave instruments and all that for a different episode. So, before we start talking about mixing and the board you should use and cables and all that kind of stuff, we need to figure out the microphone, the device that you're actually using to capture the sound coming in. There are thousands of microphones out there from hundreds of different companies, built for hundreds of different purposes, and it can be hard to pick which one you need for the job. I'm going to go over some of the more important categories of microphones that you should be looking for when deciding on one, especially for vocals, and help you make a more informed buying decision. The first and probably most obvious thing we should go over are the form factors of microphones that you can choose from. For your stereotypical preached Sunday sermon vocals, there's a few form factors that stand out more than others. First, and the one you're probably most familiar with, is a typical handheld microphone. This type of microphone can get really great sound if the person who is using it knows how to use it properly, but we have all seen speakers who have no idea how to use a microphone. To avoid that sort of problem, you could use a lavalier mic instead. This is a little bitty tiny mic that clips onto the speaker's clothing and captures the sound from there. There's even a subset of lavalier mics that we call headset mics that actually wrap over the ear and around to the side of the mouth. They get really good audio, and they can really help if you want to get your inner Britney Spears on. However, if you want something entirely invisible and your pastor is sitting down or stationary for the entirety of the sermon, a shotgun mic is actually a really great example from the film world that can be really useful in this very specific live stream only environment that we're in. It's designed to be a little bit further away, positioned stationary, pointed directly at your pastor, picking up sound from off of screen. If a completely invisible audio solution is important to you, that's going to be the mic to use. In addition to form factor, another factor you're going to want to consider when picking a microphone is what we call the pickup pattern. Contrary to what you might think, most microphones don't pick up sound equally from all directions. Many of them are actually really built to be picking up sound from a very specific direction or a couple directions. For example, I think we would all expect that a typical handheld microphone would pick up sound way better from the top of the mic than the bottom of the microphone. That's because your typical handheld microphone is called a cardioid pattern in the audio world. In general, it picks up really good audio directly in front of it and a little bit to the sides of it, and falls off towards the side with this little sort of peak in the back. These are often the most popular choice for spoken vocals, as it does a really good job of picking up the speaker and less of a good job picking up either the room or potential crowd or anything like that behind the microphone. A variant of the cardioid pickup pattern is what we call a super cardioid pickup pattern. These mics are incredibly directional, often only targeting to a very specific person or location in front of them. This is what shotgun mics, those long skinny ones, are designed to do. They're designed to be a little bit further away, really target in on a very specific speaker, and do their best to ignore all the other sound around. That being said, if the speaker gets slightly off axis, that can actually decrease the volume pretty substantially. So it's important, if you're using a shotgun mic or any super cardioid mic, that your speaker stays relatively stable, probably sitting, for the entirety of their spoken section. The last pickup pattern I think is somewhat relevant in this space is an omnidirectional microphone. This picks up sound kind of in every direction all at once. I would really only use this if you have multiple speakers kind of gathered around that microphone and you want to pick all of them up at the same time. But if you have one speaker, you're going to catch a lot more of the room, a lot of the other stuff happening. I wouldn't suggest it. So we've got our form factor, we have our pickup pattern. Now we need to talk about the difference between dynamic and condenser microphones. Now hold on, my audio pros, I know you're cringing in your seat. I know that there are more different kinds of microphones than condenser and dynamic mics, but you know as well as I do that we shouldn't be sending a brand new church audio person into their sanctuary with a ribbon microphone for their pastor when they're just trying to get set up for live streaming on a Sunday morning. All right, dynamic and condenser microphones are both microphones that use very different technology to pick up sound in the first place. The main difference between the two functionally is that condenser microphones need power to work and dynamic microphones do not. Fortunately, the cable that we use to plug in most microphones, an XLR cable, is capable of not only receiving audio in, but sending power back to the mic. All condenser microphones work off of a set standard of 48 volts in the audio world. We call this phantom power. Every board that I've ever used and every interface that I've ever used is capable of supplying phantom power, so it's not really a big deal if you're worried about compatibility. If you have a condenser mic plugged in and you're not getting any sound, it probably means you don't have phantom power turned on. However, for dynamic microphones, it is worth noting that although 99% of the time, nothing will go wrong if you send phantom power to the microphone. They'll just ignore it. There are some dynamic microphones that are not built to take that power, and you can damage them by sending phantom power to them. By default, phantom power should always be off on any channel that you're sending to unless you know that it's a condenser microphone. That is not a support call or a support chat that I want to be on the other side of. The advantage of condenser microphones after sending them that power is typically they give you a little bit of a stronger audio signal than a dynamic mic, which is considered a passive mic. Now, I know that's a lot of information, but hopefully this helps you make a more informed buying decision when it comes to finding a microphone that's right for you. If you want some specific suggestions on one that our team suggests for any of these categories, I'm going to have some of the best budget options that we have found down in the description below this video. So you've got your microphone picked up. Now we need to talk about the room that you're recording in. If you've never done this before, this may sound strange, but the room that you're recording in has a huge impact on the sound that you're going to be picking up through your microphone. There are professional recording studios built around the world that are built and tuned and fixed to very specific specifications to get exactly perfect audio recording every single time. If you're not recording in a room that was built for that exact purpose, I guarantee that there are going to be some issues that you're going to have to overcome when recording in that space. The two main ones that I think are worth talking about are noise and reverberation. Noise is relatively easy. Sit in your room, be quiet, and listen. If you can hear it, your microphone will be able to as well. Somehow, microphones can even pick up stuff that I haven't been able to hear before. That could mean air conditioning. That could mean your fridge in your kitchen. It could mean birds chirping outside. All of those minute little sounds add up to cause what can be a very distracting background to the vocals we're trying to capture. Do your best to eliminate any of those sounds, unplug anything that you need to, or deaden the ones that you don't have total control over. In addition to dealing with noise, we're also going to have to worry about how our sound from your voice is bouncing off the walls in your room and causing what we know as reverberations. Your voice sounds different in your shower than it does outside, than it does in a gymnasium, than it does in your sanctuary. The shape of your room reflects sound in different ways, and sometimes that could be a really good thing, but for recording, most of the time, at least for vocals, it can be difficult to grab a clean signal. If you have a lot of large, flat, hard surfaces, i.e. walls around you, I would do what I can to try to cover those or deaden those if you can with either pillows or blankets that you would prop up. Anything thick and soft and capable of absorbing some of that sound is going to do wonders for the cleanliness of your audio signal. Trust me, this stuff is worth the time that it takes to set it up. We've got our microphone set up, we have our space figured out. Now we need to figure out how to position the microphone itself. The golden rule here for vocals is the closer, the better. Would you rather me sound like this or like this. If you're dealing with a handheld microphone or lavalier microphone, this is relatively easy to manage, but if you have a shotgun, it can be a little bit hard to get it close to your pastor as they're preaching. When I say close for shotgun microphones, when Nick and I try to shoot a video together, we try to get that mic between 18 and 24 inches at the most from our speaker at any given time. That can mean, if you want it to be invisible, some more creative shots, much tighter shots in general, but your audio quality will thank you for it. In addition, you want to be pointing any microphone you have directly at your mouth or slightly lower if you had to pick. This will give you a nice, clean, crisp signal as well as pick up some of the lower tones in the voice. If you're using a lavalier mic like we talked about earlier, I've seen a lot of people hide it down in the shirt collar or something like that. What is important is that the mic has direct line of sight and is pointing towards the speaker's mouth as it's recording. Also, if you want to get fancy with it, there's a video by Adam Savage of Mythbusters fame where he goes into detail about how he hides his lavalier mic in the brim of his glasses. It makes for an entirely invisible setup, but obviously it takes a little bit of work to get them there. So we've got our mic set up and in place, we've got our room set in place. Now we need to run the cable from the microphone down to our audio controller. In general, there are two main types of cables that you'll be dealing with microphones. One is XLR and the other one is TRS. Just about every audio interface and board that I've used can take in both, so it really doesn't matter which one you're using. However, it is really important where and how you're going to be running your cable from your mic to your audio controller. If you run your audio cables parallel and in close proximity to power cables for a long stretch of time, the audio cables will actually pick up the interference from power cables, resulting in extra noise added to your audio signal. This noise is the bane of every audio engineer's existence. It is the dreaded ground hum, and it sounds like this. Guaranteed you've heard it before. It is a very common issue to have to diagnose, and this is just one of the many locations where it can start showing up in your audio. It can also come in from plugging your board into the wrong outlet along with other stuff. There's a lot of different factors that could lead into it, but this is one of the main locations where it pops up. So now that you've strategically run whichever cable you're running to the back of the sanctuary or your living room, now we need to figure out what we're actually plugging that cable into. There's two main options here. You can either plug directly into an audio interface that gets the signal into your computer, or you can run that signal into an audio board first. If you are only worrying about one microphone and one signal, recording straight into an audio interface is not a bad idea. If you have more than one signal you have to keep track of, like in a live music or band environment, an audio board is going to give you much quicker, more granular control over every audio signal that you're capturing in. Even if you're using an audio board, however, most audio boards will have to output that signal from the board into an interface anyway to be able to get it to your live stream. There are some fancier boards that are digital that can plug in via USB, but we're not going to deal with that for now. If you don't have an audio interface, there are tons of options available. They basically just take an analog signal from whatever you're sending and convert it to a digital one that you can use on your computer. The last time I suggested an audio interface, it was out of stock in about a week. So instead of listing a very specific option, I'm going to do my best to keep an updated link in the description to a budget-friendly audio interface that we would recommend that'll be great for most churches. Now, if you're going directly into an interface and skipping the board altogether, you're going to need to download an audio program to be able to take that signal in, record it, to mix it, to EQ it, all that kind of thing. There are a lot of different options out there, but we're going to go over some of the free ones that you have available to you. If you're only pre-recording your services and you're not streaming it live, Audacity is one of the most popular free options out there. There are technically some ways to get a live audio signal from Audacity out to a different program, but it's not something I would necessarily suggest. But if you're pre-recording your audio, it's a pretty fully featured audio editing platform. If you're on Mac OS, GarageBand, of course, is an excellent option. It's free, it comes with your Mac, and it has a lot of the features that Audacity has built into it already. If you're already using OBS to go live, it does have the ability to take in an audio signal, though it doesn't have a lot of the same editing capabilities that the other two programs do. If you're willing to go through the hassle of finding, downloading, and installing some VST plugins, you can get OBS to do pretty much everything you want, but just know that it's not necessarily designed to be an audio mixing platform to begin with. If you're on PC, I would highly suggest voice meter. There's a couple different variants like banana and potato if you need a couple more inputs, but it is a highly customizable and robust audio mixing and recording and streaming platform. I use it all the time. Anytime I have my computer open, I have voice meter potato open. It is what I'm recording this right now with. So we've got our microphone set up, we've got our room set up, we've got the cable run, we're plugged into a board or an interface. Now we need to get to the mixing stage of the process. We could spend months talking about every plugin that you could use, every technique that who or what or whatever has suggested. People have devoted their entire lives and careers to figuring out how to get a quality mix from a board into the studio. Today, we're going to go over the very basics of audio mixing, that being the levels that your audio is at and the EQ of the levels themselves. First and foremost, if you're going to spend any money in this process, it needs to be on a quality set of either studio monitors, the speakers that are designed to mix and master at, or if nothing else, a really good pair of studio headphones. I cannot stress the importance of the device you're actually monitoring the audio with. Most speakers and headphones that you would traditionally use are not flat. They're not designed to give you an accurate signal. They're designed to give you a signal that sounds good when listening to music and other stuff, but it can actually color your perception of what you're hearing from a fundamental level. I'm going to link some really good monitor and headphone options down in the descriptions if you don't have any. So first, we need to talk about levels. When we talk about the level of audio, we're more or less talking about the volume of audio, and we measure that audio in decibels or dB. There are a couple different kinds of decibels and a couple different ways to measure that audio, but for the most part, dB, we're going to be talking about the volume of the level that you're hearing. In 95% of cases, volume is adjusted with what we call the fader, or the big slidey iconic bit on your audio board or whatever program that you're using. Turn it up to make it louder, turn it down to make it quieter. However, in most cases, you're going to see a little LED light or a graph next to your fader that is either green, yellow, or red, depending on the signal that's coming out. Without going to all the basics, too much volume can actually overload the circuitry that's capturing the audio and trying to send it out. When you overload that circuitry, you start to add distortion to the mix. Things will start to sound crunchy or messed up or not good in general. Distortion can come from a lot of places, but the most common one is peaking, when you are sending too much signal to an audio source. If your signal is hitting into the red, you need to turn it down. Red is never good. Red means that you have peaked, you have clipped, and distortion is coming through. It's your job as the audio mixer to get a moderately loud, clean volume that's as close to that yellow, not into the red, as you can without it actually dipping into the clipping zone. If you're turning that fader all the way up and you're just not getting the volume that you need to be sending out to the stream, a tool that you can use, although carefully, is gain. Gain is an alternative way of adding volume to your mix. However, it can introduce a different form of distortion in the process. Gain should be used lightly and only when necessary, but most of the time you're going to want to be adjusting the fader, the actual levels, when you want to adjust the volume of the mix. Lastly, we need to talk about EQ, or equalization. If you didn't know before, every sound that you have ever heard is made up of a bunch of little tiny frequencies that all add together to make the sound that we're hearing. In general, there's a certain range of frequencies that humans are actually capable of hearing. In the audio world, we generally separate them into three different categories, that being high frequencies, mid frequencies, and low frequencies. Even though that my voice is generally lower, the majority of the spoken language of my voice and the clarity of it is coming from the mid to higher frequencies. Even if you chop out the lower portion of my voice, it's still very clear and understandable what I'm saying. However, if you chop out the higher portions and just listen to the lower bit, it feels very muddy. It's hard to understand exactly what I'm trying to say. EQ is more or less adjusting the volume of lows, middle, or highs independently of each other to get a more specific clear signal. There is absolutely no one EQ setting that is going to work for every single voice or every single guitar or every single snare drum or anything. It is entirely unique to the person or the thing that you are recording. So instead of telling you how to EQ your voice in general, I'm going to go over some of the main pain points that I see people struggling with when it comes to their audio signal on their voice. If your audio signal is sounding what we call muddy, where there's a lot of bass, a lot of low mids, and there's not a lot of clarity to the voice, just turn down the lows, the mids, and turn up the highs a little bit. It'll add a lot more clarity back to the voice. If the audio is coming off as piercing, a little bit like it hurts your ears, it's very high pitched, just turn down those highs, boost those mids, maybe lows a little bit. That'll give you a much more balanced signal. If in general the voice is feeling flat, like there's not a lot of dimension to it, it's not popping like you would want to, boosting those highs can do a lot to add a little bit of sparkle back into the voice, a little bit of bass if you need some of that the more power, that definition, the richness to it. Now, when I give these recommendations, they're very general blanket statements, and you should be doing them with a very, very fine-tooth comb. You should be using micro adjustments when playing with EQ and going very slowly and listening for the problem to be fixed, not for a new problem to be caused. If you think you have gone too far, you almost certainly have gone too far. Back it off. It needs to feel natural, not insane. So at this point, we've gone all the way through the signal chain. You have your mic set up, you have your room set up, you have the cable run, you have your mix dialed in, and now you're ready to stream it out to your church. There are a billion more things that we can cover in the audio side of the world, and I would love to do an entire series on taking every step of this process really in depth and explaining all the different factors that we could get into. However, for the time being, given the quarantine, I wanted to get a video out showing the very basics, as we're getting a lot of questions on how to do this well. If you have more questions, again, visit our Discord. We have hundreds of church media professionals and pastors that are working together to help each other, to improve each other's live stream and each other's church media ministry in general. We are all in this together. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Blackbar, and we will see you next time. If you want to dive deeper into any of the things we talked about in this video or any of the other videos, make sure to check out the Blackbar podcast. It's also released weekly. We get to go really in depth on these subjects, talking about our own experience, talking about other people who are professionals on the field. It's a really valuable resource. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week.